Heliocentric Idolatry, Returning to the Lunar Sabbath in Line with Scripture. Written by Christopher Turner, founder and editor-in-chief of Heritage Weekly. First, a word from our sponsors. Explore Christopher Turner's books on Kindle for in-depth studies on Israelite heritage and scriptural truths. Like and support to help continue spreading valuable content. Back to your content. Heliocentric Idolatry, Returning to the Lunar Sabbath in Line with Scripture. Throughout history, humanity has built its systems of timekeeping around the sun. From the Egyptians' worship of Ra to the Babylonians' solar-based calendar, these systems were deeply tied to idolatry. Even today, modern timekeeping systems reflect the legacy of these ancient practices, prioritizing solar movements and fixed weeks over the divine rhythms of creation. The Bible, however, reveals a very different system of timekeeping. Rooted in the lunar cycle, this biblical calendar reflects Yah's divine order, where the moon marks the beginning of months, the weekly Sabbaths, and the appointed feast days. As Isaiah declares, "From one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me." Isaiah 6:23, observing the Sabbath according to the new moon, aligns believers with Yah's creation, and restores the divine order lost to man-made systems. Modern timekeeping, particularly the Gregorian calendar, has its roots in sun worship. The Egyptians centered their worship on Ra, structuring festivals and years around solar cycles. The Babylonians and Greeks adopted similar practices, merging celestial observations with pagan rituals to create their calendars. Later, the Gregorian calendar, introduced in 1582, reinforced a fixed solar-based week that ignored the biblical command to mark time by the moon. This system severed humanity from Yah's divine timekeeping and perpetuated spiritual idolatry. Even today, holidays like Christmas and Easter reflect the lingering influence of sun worship, disguised as Christian observances. In contrast, the Bible emphasizes the moon as the primary marker of time. Genesis 1:14 declares that the heavenly bodies were created to mark signs, seasons, days and years, with the moon playing a central role in Yah's calendar. Psalms 4:19 reinforces this, saying, "He made the moon to mark the seasons." Isaiah 6:23 ties worship to new moons and Sabbaths, underscoring the biblical cycle of time. The lunar calendar aligns with the natural rhythms of creation. Each month begins with the new moon, and the weekly Sabbaths are counted from it. Sabbaths fall on the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th days of the lunar month, coinciding with the moon's phases. This system is not arbitrary but reflects Yah's design. The appointed feasts, such as Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, Trumpets, Atonement and Tabernacles, are all rooted in the lunar cycle, as outlined in Leviticus 23. These observances are divine appointments not subject to man's adjustments. The adoption of heliocentric models and solar-based calendars represents more than a shift in timekeeping. It is a continuation of Babylonian control and spiritual deception. By prioritizing the sun over the moon, these systems have blinded people to Yah's divine order. The fixed 7-day week of the Gregorian calendar, detached from the new moon, is a direct contradiction to the biblical rhythm. This disconnection has kept many believers in spiritual ignorance, adhering to traditions rather than seeking the truth of Yah's word. Restoring the lunar Sabbath requires a return to Yah's divine instructions. This begins with recognizing the new moon as the start of each month, and counting Sabbaths accordingly, observing the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th days of the lunar month. As Sabbaths reconnects worshippers to creation's natural rhythm. Tools like lunar calendars or direct observation of the moon's phases can help believers realign with Yah's timekeeping system. There will be challenges to implementing the lunar Sabbath in a world dominated by man-made calendars. Modern society often prioritizes convenience over obedience, making it difficult to step outside established systems. However, Isaiah reminds us, "To the law and to the testimony. If they do not speak according to this word, it is because they have no light in them." Isaiah 8:20. Restoring Yah's calendar is not about convenience but about aligning with His truth. The prophetic significance of returning to the lunar Sabbath cannot be overstated. As Isaiah 6:23 and Ezekiel 46:1-3 indicate, the new moons and Sabbaths will play a central role in the coming kingdom. Observing the lunar Sabbath is not just a matter of obedience, it is a declaration of Yah's sovereignty and a rejection of Babylonian systems of control. It prepares believers for the restoration of His kingdom and the fulfillment of His promises. Modern timekeeping based on heliocentric models reflects a history of idolatry and spiritual deception. By returning to the lunar Sabbath, believers reject these man-made systems and embrace Yah's divine order. As Isaiah declares, "From one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me." Observing the Sabbath according to the lunar cycle is not only biblically accurate, but spiritually transformative, aligning worshippers with Yah's creation and his eternal truth. All praises to the Most High. Written by Christopher Turner, founder and editor-in-chief of Heritage Weekly, pioneering covenant theology researcher and principal contributor to Rediscovering Israel, focusing on Israelite heritage, covenant theology, and ancient scriptures. Creator of the AIP after Yahawashi's Passover calendar system, a unique biblical timekeeping method based on Yahawashi's death and Passover, aligning with lunar cycles and prophecy, particularly Daniel. Author of Jacob's Trouble, The Birth of a King, The Freedom Articles, and Prophecy over DNA,